The universe has a cruel sense of timing. It waits until you are exhausted, distracted, and absolutely certain nothing important will happen. Then it rewrites your life in a single breath. Dex was deep into hour 16 of a cargo shift when that breath escaped his mouth. The docking bay was a cathedral of steel and motion. Cranes sliding along rails, freight pallets humming with contained atmospheres, gravity plates buzzing just slightly off spec. Dex moved on muscle memory alone, guided more by habit than thought. His arms ached inside powered sleeves that whined with every lift. His brain had checked out hours ago, left behind by bad coffee and worse nutrition. So when someone passed behind him, someone with a confident stride and a silhouette that caught his peripheral vision, his mouth betrayed him before his mind even noticed. A careless comment slipped out. Quiet. Thoughtless. The kind of thing meant to dissolve into background noise and be forgotten forever. Instead, the entire bay seemed to stop breathing. Footsteps halted. Machinery continued its rhythm, but the air itself felt heavier, charged. Dex sensed the silence before he understood it, the way prey senses a shadow overhead. He turned. The woman facing him did not look angry. That somehow made it worse. She stood with relaxed posture, hands loosely at her sides, dressed in fitted station attire meant for movement rather than display. Pale hair was pulled back in a practical tie. Her face was calm, unreadable, but her eyes held the kind of focus Dex had only ever seen in people accustomed to command. And then there were her ears. Longer than human. Smoothly tapered. Unmistakable. Dex's stomach dropped through the deck. Recognition hit like decompression. Not from rumor or gossip, but from sheer presence. You didn't rule star systems by accident. You didn't negotiate wars into ceasefires without learning how to still a room simply by standing in it. The Queen of the Stellar Alliance was looking directly at him. Dex straightened so fast his exosleeve shrieked in protest. Words piled up in his throat, collided, and tumbled out as something resembling an apology. It was incoherent. It was desperate. It was far too late. She took a step closer. Every survival instinct Dex possessed screamed at once. This was how people vanished. This was how cautionary tales began. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, level, curious. She asked him to repeat himself. Dex stared, convinced exhaustion had finally snapped something vital in his brain. Hallucination made sense. Power fantasies. Stress-induced nonsense. Anything but reality. I'm sorry, he managed because apologies were safe and repetition was suicide. Her expression did not change. If anything, her attention sharpened. One long ear tilted forward, a subtle motion that felt far more dangerous than anger. She told him calmly that if she were offended, security would already have ended the conversation, along with his ability to stand. That information did not help. She stepped closer still, entering his space without threat or ceremony. Up close, Dex noticed details that broadcasts never captured. Faint lines earned through years of strain, controlled breathing, the weight of something invisible resting on her shoulders. She explained, almost conversationally, that every interaction in her life was filtered, measured. People spoke to her with strategies, not truth. His mistake, she said, had been crude, socially catastrophic, and honest. The word echoed louder than any alarm. Dex swallowed hard. His instincts told him to retreat, to kneel, to say anything that would put this moment back inside its proper box. Instead, something reckless stirred, perhaps fatigue, perhaps defiance, perhaps the simple human urge to be real when pretending became unbearable. He looked at her. Not the title. Not the symbol. The woman standing alone in a cargo bay full of machines. And he repeated himself. Carefully. Plainly. Without adornment. For half a second, the universe froze. Then the Queen laughed. Not the polished sound Dex had heard on diplomatic channels, but something warm and unguarded that rang through the steel chamber like a forgotten echo. It startled him so badly he glanced around, half expecting automated reprimands or descending drones. Nothing happened. The station accepted this impossible moment without comment. She covered her mouth briefly as if surprised by herself, then let her hand fall. She admitted she had nearly forgotten what laughter sounded like. Her own, not his. Dex, standing there in stained work gear and very bad shoes, realized he had just made one of the most powerful beings in known space laugh because he had been too tired to lie. They spoke then. Not as ruler and subject, but as two people sharing an unscheduled crack in reality. He complained about malfunctioning loaders and station food that tasted like processed regret. She listened with fascination, asking questions that revealed how distant ordinary life had become for her. She asked what he thought she was before he knew. Dex answered honestly. Someone fit, confident, untouchable. Not a queen. She smiled at that. Time stretched. Somewhere, schedules lied convincingly. Somewhere else, advisors assumed control was being maintained. Before leaving, she extended her hand in a gesture she admitted was human. Dex hesitated, then took it. Her grip was firm, warm, unmistakably real. She told him this would not be their last improper conversation. Days passed. Dex tried to bury the incident under routine and denial. The universe refused to cooperate. She returned. Disguised poorly. Curious openly. Sitting on crates and watching him work like the cargo bay was a window into a life she had never been allowed to touch. They talked. About everything that never reached council chambers. About fatigue. About pretending. About how honesty slipped out when people were too tired to maintain masks. And slowly, dangerously, something shifted. Dex noticed the way security drones lingered longer. The way her posture changed when others were near, armor sliding back into place. He realized with growing unease that their unscripted honesty was becoming visible. One day she arrived without a smile. She told him hostile diplomats were coming. That they would probe and pressure, expecting calculation and control. She feared hesitation. Dex told her that honesty wasn't weakness. It was clarity. And clarity, while dangerous, was better than suffocation. She listened. When she left for the negotiations, she leaned close enough to whisper a joke about dying of boredom. Dex wished her luck she didn't need. Hours later, the station buzzed with rumors. Deals shifted. Voices rose. Power rearranged itself. When she returned, long after Dex's shift should have ended, her eyes were bright with something like victory. She had stopped pretending. She told him so. And just before duty reclaimed her, she pressed a small warm token into his hand. Something unmarked, steady, and alive with quiet purpose. For when the universe feels personal again, she said. Dex watched her disappear into the station's arteries, unaware that somewhere far beyond the docking bay, consequences had already begun to ripple outward. He didn't yet know how much that single honest moment had destabilized an entire balance of power. But he was about to find out. Power does not shatter loudly. It fractures in quiet places first, in rooms without banners, in moments no one bothers to record. Dex discovered this the morning the cargo bay received a security upgrade it absolutely did not need. He noticed it before anyone said a word. New drones. Sleeker frames. Alliance-grade optics pretending to be maintenance units. They floated with the patient confidence of predators instructed not to pounce yet. Dex felt their attention like a pressure behind the eyes. Nothing in his job description had changed. He still moved freight. Still swore at loaders. Still negotiated daily with machines that responded better to insults than commands. But the space around him had shifted, subtly rearranged by invisible hands. The universe, it seemed, was paying attention now. The Queen did not appear that day. Nor the next. Dex told himself it was expected. That worlds did not pivot around tired cargo handlers. That rulers did not vanish into loading bays forever. He folded the thought away like a tool he might need later, refusing to inspect it too closely. The token she had given him remained warm in his locker, constant as a heartbeat. He did not activate it, scan it, or ask anyone what it was. Some things earn privacy simply by existing. Across the station, conversations changed tone. Diplomats walked faster. Security teams rehearsed routes that had never mattered before. Data terminals buzzed with analysis, trying desperately to explain why negotiations across multiple sectors were suddenly ending without bloodshed or brinkmanship. The analysts struggled because the cause did not fit into models. The Queen had begun asking questions. Not strategic ones. Not the kind designed to corner an opponent or extract leverage. She asked why agreements mattered to people who would never see their benefits. She asked what compromise felt like on the ground. She asked what everyone else was pretending not to feel. Advisors called it a phase. They were wrong. Dex learned this 3 days later when two people in immaculate Alliance uniforms stepped into the cargo bay pretending they belonged there. Their boots were too clean. Their eyes too sharp. They asked his name. They asked about his schedule. They asked when he had first encountered the Queen. Dex answered carefully, truthfully, and with just enough confusion to make it clear he was not important. They left unsatisfied. That night, the token pulsed brighter than it ever had. Elsewhere, the Queen sat in a chamber designed to magnify authority. Advisors ringed her like furniture given opinions. Projections danced in the air, mapping trade routes, political fault lines, projected instability curves. She listened. Then she did something that unsettled them more than any outburst could have. She disagreed. Calmly. Precisely. With reasons that did not reference precedent or tradition, but lived experience. She spoke of workers. Of exhaustion. Of honesty surfacing when masks failed. Of how power lost credibility when it could not tolerate unfiltered truth. Her advisors warned her of perception. Of weakness. Of dangerous informality. She asked them when strength had become synonymous with silence. No one answered. Word spread. On fringe stations and border worlds, people noticed the shift first. Inspection teams arrived and actually listened. Complaints filed years ago received responses that did not involve apologies wrapped around refusals. Local leaders found themselves in conversations instead of confrontations. Hope is dangerous. It spreads faster than fear. Dex heard the whispers long before he saw their consequences. Dockworkers spoke in low voices about better contracts on alliance hubs. About disputes resolved without blockades. About a ruler who seemed to remember what gravity felt like. He tried not to connect himself to any of it. The universe refused his cooperation. The Queen returned on the 7th day. No disguise. No entourage. No announcement. She walked into the cargo bay like someone stepping into a memory, posture relaxed but eyes alert. Conversations died mid-sentence. Workers froze, unsure whether to bow or breathe. She waved them back to work with a casual gesture that sent shockwaves through station protocol. Dex met her gaze across the bay. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition. Relief. And an awareness that this moment was already being recorded by a dozen invisible systems. They did not embrace. They did not speak privately. She simply stood near him while he worked. It was a declaration. Advisors watched through feeds horrified. Political rivals took notes. Entire committees convened to determine whether proximity to an unremarkable human constituted a vulnerability. Dex felt the weight of it settle onto his shoulders like a borrowed mantle. Later, in a maintenance corridor shielded from surveillance by age and neglect, she finally spoke to him of consequences. Of resistance within her own court. Of factions that preferred predictable tyranny to uncertain honesty. She told him some believed he was manipulating her. Dex nearly laughed at that. Instead he told her the truth. That he was scared. That he did not want to be important. That he had never asked to matter beyond his shift. She listened, then told him importance was rarely requested. It arrived uninvited, disruptive, and impossible to return. The token warmed sharply between them. She explained what it was then, not as technology but as intent. A key bound to her authority. A tether that allowed her to act outside layers of restriction if needed. She had given it to him because she trusted his exhaustion more than her court's ambition. Dex realized then how far past caution they had already gone. The following cycle, the Alliance convened an emergency session. A motion was introduced questioning the Queen's judgment. Carefully worded. Perfectly legal. Backed by those who thrived under the old calculus of power. Dex watched the broadcast from a break room, hands clenched around a cup of something pretending to be tea. The Queen stood alone. She did not defend herself with history or victories. She spoke of accountability. Of listening. Of the danger of ruling people without ever hearing them unguarded. She mentioned no names. No cargo bays. No tired humans. The vote failed by a narrow margin. Too narrow. That night, the station went into partial lockdown under the pretense of a systems audit. Dex understood what that meant. She found him before security did. Not in the bay. Not on the cameras. In the oldest section of the station, where gravity fluctuated and history leaked from the walls. She told him they were moving against her quietly now. That the tether she had given him could force a choice she hoped never to make. Dex felt something settle in his chest. Not fear. Resolve. He told her that honesty had started this. That running from it would only prove her enemies right. She smiled sadly with the weight of someone who knew the cost of standing still. Above them, alarms began to sound. Not evacuation. Not drills. Containment. The token in Dex's hand flared hot, reacting to something he could not see. Security teams flooded the upper levels. The Queen looked at him, not as a ruler or a symbol, but as a person standing at the edge of a decision that would redraw the galaxy. And in that moment, Dex realized the universe was about to demand an answer it could never take back. History rarely announces itself with speeches. Sometimes it arrives as a locked door and a choice you never trained for. The station's containment alarms did not scream. They whispered. Low-frequency pulses designed to soothe civilians while quietly sealing sections of the habitat into isolated compartments. Dex felt it through the deck plating before he saw it on the status panels. gravity modulation shifting, transit corridors closing like clenched fists. This was not an exercise. Around them, the oldest maintenance wing flickered between lighting cycles, strips of illumination struggling to remember their purpose. The Queen stood motionless, listening to systems only she and the station could hear. Her ears angled slightly, not in fear but calculation. "They are moving faster than expected," she said. Dex swallowed. "That's usually what people say right before everything gets loud." She almost smiled. The token in his hand pulsed again, sharper now, its warmth bordering on pain. Dex understood instinctively that this wasn't a warning, it was a question. The tether was waiting to be used, and once it was, nothing about his life would remain small again. Security chatter crackled faintly through hidden conduits in the walls. Alliance units, officially tasked with stabilization, were converging on her last known location. Advisors had framed it as protection. Everyone else would call it custody. "You can still walk away," she said quietly. "If they find me alone, the narrative remains manageable. You disappear back into anonymity." Dex laughed once, short and humorless. "You really don't understand humans, do you?" She turned to him, puzzled. "We're terrible at walking away once someone treats us like we matter," he said. "It sticks." The station shuddered. Somewhere above them, a blast door sealed with a sound like a verdict. The Queen nodded, as if he had confirmed something she already knew. "Then listen carefully. The tether allows me to invoke an emergency audience. An override embedded in Alliance law so old most believe it ceremonial. It forces all major faction leaders to observe my next action in real time." Dex frowned. "Observe what action?" Her gaze held his, steady and unflinching. "Defiance." They moved. Not running, moving with intent through corridors Dex had only ever cursed while repairing. He knew their blind spots, their faulty sensors, the doors that lagged half a second behind command input. He guided her through spaces no ruler had ever bothered to map. Behind them, security teams advanced methodically, overconfident in procedure. They did not expect a Queen to follow a cargo handler into forgotten veins of infrastructure. As they walked, the station itself seemed to choose sides. Lights flickered on ahead of them. Access panels opened without prompts. Old systems responded to Dex's presence like loyal animals. "Why does it help you?" she asked. He shrugged. "I fix it when it breaks. Machines remember that." They reached a narrow junction overlooking the station's central atrium, a cavernous void threaded with traffic lanes and holographic signage. Hundreds of civilians moved below, unaware that power was about to reveal its teeth. The Queen stopped. "This is far enough," she said. "From here I speak." Dex hesitated. "And after?" She did not answer. She placed her hand over the token still clutched in his palm. The heat surged, then steadied. Systems across the Alliance woke as if struck by lightning. In council chambers light years away, projections snapped to life. Admirals, trade ministers, planetary governors, faces hardened by politics, found themselves unwillingly connected to a single feed. The Queen stood framed against industrial steel instead of marble. She began without ceremony. She told them the truth. Not accusations. Not rhetoric. She described the erosion of trust. The cost of distance. The way power calcified when it could not hear unguarded voices. She spoke of fear masquerading as tradition and control mistaken for stability. She told them someone had reminded her what honesty sounded like. Dex felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pass over him through the link. His anonymity burned away in real time. Security teams burst into the maintenance wing then, weapons raised but hesitant. Orders conflicted in their channels. Arresting a Queen broadcasting live to the galaxy was not covered in training manuals. She did not stop speaking. She announced reforms. Immediate ones. Oversight structures that included civilian representation. Rotating advisory councils drawn from non-political professions. Transparency mandates that stripped closed-door negotiations of their shadows. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Some faces vanished from the feed. Others erupted in protest. A few, too few, watched with something like awe. The station trembled again, harder this time. Emergency thrusters fired to counterbalance sudden shifts in orbital authority as fleets repositioned themselves on reflex alone. Dex felt suddenly terrifyingly small. Security finally moved. They advanced with the careful steps of people who knew history was watching and might judge them personally. Their leader issued a formal request for compliance that rang hollow even to his own ears. The Queen finished speaking. Silence followed, deep and absolute. Then she did something no one expected. She stepped back. "I am not leaving," she said calmly. I am returning power to the people who live with its consequences. Starting now. She deactivated the feed. Chaos erupted. Orders flooded the station. Half contradicted the other. Fleets hesitated. Governors argued. Markets fluctuated wildly, responding not to action but uncertainty. The Queen turned to Dex. I have removed myself from the board, she said. They will attempt to reclaim control by force or narrative. Either way, I am no longer safe here. Dex stared at her. You just lit the galaxy on fire. Yes, she replied. But fires reveal what survives. Alarms changed tone, this time unmistakably hostile. External docking clamps disengaged. Unauthorized vessels surged toward the station, their intent hidden behind layers of legal justification. They're coming for you, Dex said. She shook her head. They are coming for the idea I represent. The station's ancient AI spoke then, its voice threading through the chaos. It offered evacuation routes. Probabilities. Warnings. Dex made a decision before fear could argue. He grabbed her hand. We leave, he said. Not through official channels. Her eyes widened just slightly. There's a freighter, he continued. Old. Decommissioned on paper but still breathing. No one looks twice at garbage. Security shouts echoed closer now. The token flared one last time, then went cool, its purpose fulfilled. They ran. Behind them, power structures convulsed. Ahead, a future without maps opened like a wound. As they reached the docking bay and the ancient freighter's lights flickered to life, Dex realized the galaxy would soon label him many things. Traitor. Catalyst. Threat. But as the first unauthorized ship locked weapons on their position, he understood something far worse was coming. The galaxy was about to decide whether honesty was worth surviving. Running from power is easy. Escaping its consequences is not. The freighter lurched free of the station with all the grace of a wounded animal. Hull plating rattled. Engines coughed like they hadn't been asked to do real work in years. Dex slammed a hand across a panel that still used physical switches, not trusting software to understand urgency. Behind them, the station's lights flared as unauthorized vessels detached in pursuit. They'll tag our drive signature, Dex muttered, fingers dancing over controls that responded more out of loyalty than obedience. Old ship or not, physics is still physics. The Queen stood at the rear viewport watching the station shrink. No fear showed on her face, only a quiet, terrible awareness. She had stepped off the stage and taken the spotlight with her. They cannot fire, she said. Not yet. Because of politics? Dex asked. Because of witnesses, she replied. Every move they make now is a precedent. That comfort lasted exactly 12 seconds. A warning tone screamed through the cockpit as a targeting sweep brushed the freighter's hull. Not a lock. A reminder. Dex grinned tightly. That's them saying hello. He shoved the throttle forward. The freighter's engines protested, then roared, flinging them into a debris field that glittered like a minefield of forgotten wars. Dex flew by instinct, weaving through wreckage and discarded station components, trusting the ship's ugliness to be its camouflage. Behind them, pursuit ships hesitated. Military craft were designed for clean engagements, not scrapyard brawls. They slipped free. For now. Hours later, drifting on minimal output in the shadow of a dead moon, Dex finally let his hands shake. The adrenaline crash hit hard. He laughed once, sharp and incredulous. I used to complain about overtime, he said. Now I'm a fugitive. The Queen sat opposite him in the cramped galley, knees drawn in slightly, posture relaxed in a way Dex had never seen outside the cargo bay. You are not listed, she said. Officially you do not exist. That's comforting in a deeply horrifying way. She studied him, her gaze thoughtful. You chose this. Yeah, Dex replied. Turns out honesty has a terrible benefits package. Silence settled, not awkward but heavy. Outside, the moon's cracked surface reflected starlight like broken glass. They will fracture, she said at last. Some will follow me. Others will harden against what I've done. The alliance was always held together by agreement, not unity. Dex leaned back. And you? I am now a variable, she said. Unacceptable to those who fear change. As if summoned by her words, the ship's sensors chimed softly. Dex's smile faded. Multiple signals, he said. Not military. The display resolved into a cluster of small vessels emerging from subspace, their transponders flickering between identities like nervous habits. Refugees. Traders. Independent haulers. They hailed the freighter. Dex hesitated. Could be a trap. Or hope, the Queen replied. They answered. The first face that appeared was weathered, eyes sharp with survival. Is it true? The woman asked without preamble. Did the Queen really walk away? The Queen leaned into frame. No crown. No regalia. Just her. Yes, she said. I chose people over systems. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers. Tears. Shouted questions. Offers of aid. Warnings. Entire communities had been waiting for permission they hadn't realized they needed. Dex watched the feed stunned. You didn't just start a reform, he said quietly. You started a migration. Yes, she agreed. And they will try to stop it. They didn't have to wait long. The trap closed 2 days later. As the freighter escorted a loose flotilla of civilian ships toward a neutral corridor, space folded ahead of them. Warships emerged with brutal precision, their hulls bearing the marks of an alliance faction that had decided precedent was less important than control. The lead vessel broadcast a single message. Return the Queen. Amnesty will be considered. Dex's jaw tightened. That's a lie. The Queen's ears angled back, not in fear but sorrow. They believe stability is worth any cost. The flotilla panicked. Civilian captains shouted over open channels. Engines flared unpredictably. Dex took a breath. If we scatter, they'll pick us apart. She looked at him. And if we stand? He shrugged. Then we force them to choose who they really are. He opened the channel. This is a civilian convoy, Dex said, voice steady despite the terror clawing his chest. You fire, you prove everything, she said. The warships did not respond. Weapons charged. The Queen stepped beside him, her presence calm as gravity. They will hesitate, she said. They always do when truth removes their excuses. Seconds stretched. Targeting systems screamed. Then, one of the warships powered down its weapons. Another followed. Confusion rippled through the enemy formation. Orders contradicted. Authority fractured. But not all hesitated. A cruiser at the rear broke formation, weapons hot, moving to fire regardless of consequence. Dex felt something cold settle in his gut. That one's not stopping. The Queen closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve. Then we make them see. She activated the last function of the tether, not as authority but as testimony. Every ship in range, civilian and military alike, received the same feed. Her face filled their displays. She spoke not as a queen but as a witness, to lives lost to silence, to wars prolonged by pride, to systems that protected themselves at the expense of people. The rogue cruiser fired. Energy tore through space, and slammed into a wall of bodies. Civilian ships surged forward, interposing themselves, shields flaring, captains making a choice without orders or guarantees. The blast dissipated, scattered by sacrifice and defiance. The cruiser hesitated, then powered down. The battlefield fell silent. Dex exhaled shakily. You just taught the galaxy how to say no. The Queen's voice was quiet. They taught themselves. Cheers erupted across open channels. Not victory cries, relief, recognition. But Dex knew better than to believe it was over. Far away, beyond witnesses and feeds, forces were regrouping. Power never surrendered all at once. It waited. It adapted. As the flotilla resumed its course, Dex caught movement on the sensor edge, something massive shifting in deep space too far to identify. The Queen followed his gaze. They will come again, she said. Stronger. Smarter. Dex nodded. Good. She looked at him. If they're going to rewrite the rules, he continued, they'll have to deal with the people who got tired of pretending. The sensor contact grew clearer, fleet scale. And for the first time since this began, Dex realized the next confrontation wouldn't be about escape. It would be about whether this fragile, honest rebellion could survive its first real war. Revolutions do not begin with gunfire. They begin with people realizing they are no longer alone. Dex understood this as the first true fleet emerged from deep space. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't unified. It didn't move with the polished discipline of an empire. It arrived unevenly, freighters retrofitted with shield arrays, survey vessels bristling with jury-rigged weapons, civilian transports flying in tight formation like nervous birds refusing to scatter. A people's fleet. Dex stared at the sensor display, pulse thudding in his ears. That's not alliance. No, the Queen said softly. That's everyone else. Across open channels, voices overlapped in dozens of languages and dialects. Captains reported in not because they had been ordered to, but because they wanted to be counted. Miners, traders, medics, entire families aboard ships never meant for war. They were terrified. They came anyway. The opposing force responded moments later. Alliance hardliners arrived with precision and confidence, their ships dark and angular, weapons already charged. They had numbers, training, and doctrine. They had certainty. Certainty was their weakness. "This is your last opportunity," the lead Alliance commander transmitted. "Surrender the Queen and disperse. The alternative will be recorded as insurrection." Dex leaned toward the console, hands steady now in a way they hadn't been since before the cargo bay. "Funny," he said quietly. "They think this is still about her." The Queen stood beside him, no longer the focal point, just one presence among many. "Then let's correct the record." She opened the channel, not to command but to invite. "Do not follow me," she said to the gathered fleet. "Do not fight for my sake. Fight only if you believe your voice matters. Fight only if you are done being invisible." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then ships began broadcasting their own feeds. A dockworker from a border station spoke of wages stolen by delayed treaties. A medic described evacuations that never came because acknowledging them would look like weakness. A pilot talked about sons drafted into wars no one could explain anymore. Truth flooded the channel like decompression. The Alliance commander tried to cut the feed. Failed. Too many independent relays carried it now. Too many witnesses. Weapons powered up across both sides. Dex felt the moment stretch thin, like a cable pulled to its limit. This was the point where history decided whether courage was contagious or fatal. The first shot came from neither side. It came from the Alliance fleet's flank. A cruiser peeled away, broadcasting a simple message before powering down its weapons. "We did not sign up to fire on civilians." Another followed. Then another. Alliance formation fractured, discipline collapsing under the weight of conscience they had not trained for. The hardliners reacted instantly. Orders barked. Threats issued. Emergency protocols triggered. And then someone fired. The battle exploded into motion. Dex threw the freighter into a burn that rattled his teeth. Energy lanced across space, shields flaring bright as newborn suns. Civilian ships flew not in chaos, but in mutual defense. Overlapping coverage, improvised formations learned in seconds because survival demanded cooperation. Dex guided his ship where it was needed, plugging gaps, dragging damaged vessels out of fire. He shouted coordinates and encouragement in equal measure, discovering that leadership sometimes sounded exactly like yelling directions while scared. The Queen moved through the chaos like gravity itself. Not issuing commands, listening. Redirecting. Amplifying the right voices at the right moments. A missile slipped through. Dex saw it too late. The blast tore through a medical transport on the edge of the formation. Shields failed. Hull ruptured. The scream over open channel cut through everything. Something inside Dex snapped. He pushed the freighter beyond safety margins, engines screaming as he intercepted the next volley meant for another civilian ship. Alarms wailed. Systems failed one by one. "Dex," the Queen said sharply. "Pull back." "Can't," he replied. "Not yet." The freighter took the hit. Pain was abstract at first, force without sensation. Then the deck slammed him sideways and stars burst behind his eyes. Emergency bulkheads sealed, trapping smoke and silence in equal measure. Dex coughed, struggling to his feet. The ship drifted, power flickering. Across the battlefield, the effect was immediate. Civilian ships surged toward him without hesitation. Alliance defectors broke formation entirely, placing themselves between the freighter and incoming fire. The hardliner commander hesitated. That hesitation ended the fight. Orders dissolved into arguments. Fleets disengaged. Retreats were announced and ignored. One by one, Alliance vessels withdrew, leaving behind a battlefield littered with wreckage, survivors, and something far more dangerous than victory. Proof. Hours later, the remains of the People's Fleet gathered around a fractured moon, patching hulls and counting losses. The dead were named aloud. The living listened. Dex sat on the freighter's ramp, bruised and exhausted beyond language. The Queen stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on the hull as if feeling the ship's pulse. "You saved lives," she said. "So did they," Dex replied, nodding toward the fleet. "They just needed an excuse." She studied him, something fierce and proud in her expression. "You realize what happens now?" He snorted softly. "They'll rewrite laws. Draw lines. Call this the beginning of something and argue about who owns it." "Yes," she agreed. "And they will try to make you a symbol." Dex grimaced. "I hate symbols." "I know," she said gently. "That's why they'll never fully control this." A signal came through then, not military, not civilian. An alliance-wide broadcast request. Unrestricted. Every system lit up as the message propagated faster than anyone could stop it. A familiar face appeared on the display. The former Alliance commander. He looked tired. Older. Today, he said, we learned that obedience is not the same as order. And order is meaningless without consent. He announced his resignation. Then something unprecedented. The dissolution of his command authority, effective immediately, pending civilian review. Across the galaxy, power structures convulsed. Dex exhaled slowly. That's big. Yes, the Queen said. And unstable. She turned to him, eyes searching. They will ask what comes next. Dex shrugged. Tell them the truth. She smiled. Which is? That we don't know, he said. That we figure it out together. That no one gets to pretend this is clean or easy. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, resolute. A new signal appeared on sensors then. Not hostile. Not friendly. Ancient. Automated beacons long thought dormant were waking across the galaxy, responding to the same broadcasts, the same fracture in authority. Systems older than the Alliance, designed for contingencies no one remembered. The Queen's ears angled forward, alert. What is that? Dex asked. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quiet, awed. That, she said, is the galaxy noticing. The beacons pulsed again, brighter this time. Dex felt a chill that had nothing to do with vacuum. Whatever they had started was no longer just political. Something vast had been waiting for honesty long enough to recognize it. And now it was awake.